What's your best wedding horror story? Bride had 14 attendants, each of whom got their own song to walk down the aisle to. The church was overpacked by 100 people. The air broke in July and said church, nope, nary a window to be had in 90-degree Iowa summer. Ceremony was almost 3 hours long because 1, so many people wanted to recite poems or sing songs or whatever, and 2, the groom's brother gave the wedding talk and turned it into a remember when we did this blow by blow of their entire childhood. We finally get to the blessedly cool reception hall. Dinner was supposed to start at 6 p.m. At 8:30 p.m. the bride fainted from lack of food. This was after another 2 hours of cousins and aunts and uncles giving speech, poem and song one after another. Why they didn't do this after the food was severed I will never know. And finally around midnight their fight between the best man and one of the groomsmen. Both of them were blackout drunk and wanted one of the 14 bridesmaids' numbers. They decided to fight it out in the middle of the dance floor. I'm actually a wedding DJ as well. I once attended a wedding in which the groom failed to attend. It was a total disaster. The bride looked like she could have been just 18. Absolutely adorably cute, and she just sat out in the hallway crying with her parents while her friends and family were moved from the ceremony hall to the reception area for dinner and drinks. Weirdly enough though, the groom showed up later in the evening after the minister had already gone home. We had their formal dances, but on that day, they didn't actually get married. A horror story with a happy ending. Friends had a small wedding, with the reception in a private area of a restaurant, with about 30 people. After the meal, our server came through the doors with the 3-tier wedding cake in her arms. When she got front and center, she slipped and hit the floor like a rock, face first into the cake. The initial laughter stopped quickly when it seemed she might be hurt, because she wasn't moving. She got up with help, obviously sore, but crying as hard as I've ever seen, hysterically apologizing over and over. Fast forward a couple hours, and thankfully she was physically okay. But even better, she was serving New Yorkers with money who felt terrible for her, and were now drunk. I don't know what the hosting couple tipped her, but I'm certain she picked up another $5,000 from the guests on the side. I threw her a $100, and I'm cheap. She was crying again when we left, but for an entirely different reason. My brother's third wedding. Everyone shows up except the bride's father, who shows up almost an hour late in a t-shirt and jeans. Proceeds to loudly exclaim what he would do to the bridesmaids. Insults the groomsmen for dressing up. Gets faced and wrecks on the way out. Or my father's wedding, where the bride's mother brought whiskey to the wedding. Gets faced before the ceremony and loudly exclaims how my father is not good enough for my mother. Gets thrown out and slashes the tires on the limo. I'll take shit that happens in Alabama for $200, Alex. My husband forgot his pants. We got married in a remote area where there were no extra pants to be had. He had to wear my dad's pants. I forgot an undershirt at my own wedding, which would be no big deal except my shirt was white and my brown nipples like to say hi. Especially on a hot day in July. I had to buy a shirt from the conference hall gift shop, and it had Princeton written in orange across the front. I just turned it inside out and was good to go. Marriage ended, but I still have my Princeton shirt, and I live in Princeton now, so it works out. For the record, this happened 2 days ago at my cousin's wedding. The bride and groom had requested there be no young children at the wedding, which in my opinion is a pretty understandable request. Well, a member of one of the families created a huge stink about it, saying they had no one to watch their 1-year-old. My cousin and his fiancée kept insisting that they didn't want children, at least at the ceremony. Well, they brought the baby anyway. I bet you can guess what happens next. 2 minutes into the respectful silence of a really nice ceremony, the baby starts screaming bloody murder. Luckily they were at least respectful enough to leave when the baby started crying. Well, I guess baby calmed down. Brought them back in, and before you know, round 2 bloody murder. You could feel the entire crowd cringe. I felt terrible for my cousin and his new wife because they are really genuine and understanding people. It was incredibly rude and disrespectful. TL. Dr. Bride and groom requests no babies. Someone brings baby. Baby screams bloody murder during ceremony. Twice. More funny than horror. I was one of 9 groomsmen in my friend's wedding. When we stood on the stage during the ceremony, the last groomsman in the line, the bride's brother, was a good 30 feet from where the bride and groom were standing. Anyways. Before we walked out, bride's brother says to me, "Man, I got a fart so badly." Me thinking he was joking just told him to let her rip. About 10 minutes into the 45-minute long ceremony he did indeed let her rip, but silently so. Due to the air conditioning in the church being on. It took a bit for the stench to hit me. It was like a low-hanging fog. Over the course of the next couple minutes I observed this putreficient cloud overtake each groomsman one by one until hitting first the groom's nostrils. Then the priest and finally the bride, who started gagging. I was at my aunt's wedding. As she was walking down the aisle, a phone rang. It was her soon-to-be mother-in-law's. It rang for a while she fumbled through her purse. She finally got it out and answered it. Asterisk. And talked for a while my aunt was walking down the aisle. Went to a wedding once where the caterer messed up the food so bad that it was basically inedible. They ended up making up for it by ordering a mass amount of chicken from KFC. The reception was literally just KFC meals. Everyone was shocked and horrified. Me? I loved it cause come on. Who doesn't love some good old Colonel chicken? As someone getting married in July, this thread greatly worries me. Be careful who you invite. Know who the drunks, troublemakers, loudmouths are. Know who is there for you and yours and who is there for the free booze and food etc. Have everything arranged so that you can focus on your soul and not babysitting the guests. I had to babysit certain guests. Track down others. Keep certain underage guests from drinking. Keep certain guests from others to avoid confrontations. Dealing with high maintenance people. Answering stupid questions and requests all night long. I spent way more time doing all this than enjoying the wedding. If possible, have the ceremony and after party in such a place that all the details are worked out and you have a staff of people tending the crowd. This way you can escape the event with your so. Drunkenly broke my heel as best man at a wedding. Well, I guess there are worse Scott related wedding things that could have happened. My brother proposed to his girlfriend at my wedding. Oh, and my husband's co-worker wanted to bring his 2 young daughters to our wedding. 4 and 6 years old maybe. He said they would be good, they've been to weddings before. So we say yes. They show up in the flower girl dresses that their parents got for their cancelled wedding and proceed to act like flower girls. They photobomb a bunch of our pictures. The ones of just the married couple. Before we had to ask them to get out of the shots. Everyone asked if they were the flower girls. Many years ago my parents went to an adults-only wedding. It seems at these types of weddings there is always that one couple that brings their kids anyway. Well, during the reception one of the guests had a heart attack and died right on the dance floor. My parents said it was pretty traumatic watching people scramble to try and perform CPR and hearing the thumping of fists hitting his chest and seeing his bowels release all over the place. Needless to say, the kids that were present were horrified and the mother kept trying to turn everyone's concern to her kids instead of the dead gentleman on the floor and a couple whose wedding reception just got ruined. My mother not telling any of us she had both her legs amputated and showing up at my wedding and reception, both being held at non-HP friendly locations, having to be carried upstairs in a wheelchair. I was at a friend's wedding reception and we're having a good time dancing. A different friend's kid, maybe 5 or 6 years old, was hiding under a table while his parents were getting shit-faced and ignoring him. The kid then starts running and laughing through the dance floor and I see him wipe something that looks like chocolate on the bride's dress. She's mortified and everybody stops dancing. It was tea. He had tea into his hand and wiped it on people. Years later. My wedding was child-free. We had a real DJ at our wedding, spinning records and playing weird electronic dance music. My brother got lit on the free booze and apparently took a bunch of pills. He then proceeded to give the DJ tons of pills. Our DJ then went on a 45-minute set of original music and was the definition of shit-faced. When we tried to leave and say goodbye to everyone on the microphone, he told us that he was almost done and we could have the microphone in like 10-15 minutes when he finished up. My brother puked in front of everyone after we left. Back at the hotel after my wedding, a cousin of mine cheated on her husband with one of my groomsmen, while under the impression me and said groomsmen were related. As in, when I told her the next morning that he was my buddy from college, she was disappointed. Like visibly deflated. He was just a friend of mine. It was interesting because at my wedding shower she was stirring up controversy by sitting on my dad's lap and whispering stuff in his ear. She is my first cousin. My dad is her uncle. She didn't ruin any actual events, I suppose, but she certainly got people talking afterwards. We don't invite her to stuff anymore. My sister-in-law asked to sing at our wedding. We said no, it was super casual and not religious at all. She sang anyways. A good friend of mine had someone open fire during his brother's wedding. The shooter was aiming for the groom. Thankfully he missed and no one was hurt. The police showed up after a few people tackled the shooter and held him down. The wedding party carried on as if nothing happened. Lol. I work at a museum that people rent out for weddings on nights and weekends. I was working a wedding a while back where the bride disappeared as soon as the dances were over. I was walking around the other end of the building when I almost walked past the bride sobbing all over her mother, cry I can't be married. I don't love him. I've made a mistake over and over as her mom was trying to console her. I noped away from that really fast. Talking to the bartender later on. She had been drinking heavily since the bar opened. Went to a wedding when I was like 8 and it was at a super nice place. There was a giant waiting room for the 30 bathroom stalls. It was a Victorian style room. I was just chilling in there with my cousin, playing with some toys I had brought, when all of a sudden barge in all these women with a man that's clobbering this woman. I would later come to find out that was his wife, all because he told her not to go to the wedding. He thought it was her wedding and she was trying to marry someone else, presumably to get out of this abusive relationship she was in. It was so sad. The man got arrested and sentenced to 39 years, for some other shit too. The woman had to go to the hospital. She got 18 stitches and lost some teeth. She's widowed now cause some guys beat the shit out of him for being a tough guy and thinking it's okay to beat his wife. I used to do wedding video but really didn't see many horrors. Only 2 come to mind. 1. Leslie, that's the name of the bride. She was a bridezilla before the term existed. She was horrible to absolutely every single person she encountered at the wedding. Well, almost everyone, as I somehow managed to escape her off. BTW. Me and my biz partner in the video business received dozens of referrals from her. 2. The wedding without a photographer. Almost. Their photographer did not show up and could not be reached. They started calling photographers in the yellow pages and managed to get someone. Not only someone but a very good one. And the only reason they got him was because he had retired the year before and his ad was mistakenly still in the yellow pages. Funnier yet, he photographed my wedding a few years earlier. Small world and all that. Edit. Forgot to add. The original photographer showed up for the reception, which was held at one of the nicest country clubs in the area, wearing shorts, a t-shirt and flip-flops, and couldn't understand why everyone was so pissed off. My brother's fiancée showed up late to her own wedding. She showed up an hour late to her own wedding shower. So that wasn't a giant surprise, but still really rude. The odd thing was, her limo showed up in the parking lot. It was an outside event, and sat there for a bit. Then peeled out and drove away. She came back and everything went fine. We learned less than a year later that she had been sleeping with someone else during that time. And they got a divorce when the baby was born and wasn't my brother's. Buddy and me fresh out of video production school. Did videography for a wedding. He lost half the footage the night after and he's socially awkward, so I got to deal with the pissed off bride and her mother. Second story for this thread. I had a relative collapse and start having trouble breathing shortly after dancing started. I saw a group of people helping him to a chair and he seemed like he was really ready to pass out. Paramedics were called and they quickly got there, within minutes it seemed, and helped him onto a stretcher. The guy never lost consciousness. But since I had turned the music off, it really put a very awkward and gloomy shadow on the wedding. The bride was sort of panicked and I told her that we just pick up where we left off and that we'd pass along info as we received it. And that I would need her and the bridal party's help to get the floor going again. It was definitely a strange feeling. But within a few minutes, things did get back to normal and the guy ended up being released that very night. He had gone golfing earlier in the day and just gave out. My cousin's daughter got diarrhea and puke all over her wedding dress maybe 5 minutes before she was supposed to walk down the aisle. To start off, Iceland has a very small gene pool. So small in fact. There was maid and anti-incest app to make sure that you're not banging you cousin. Or if you are, at least you know it. I once went to the wedding of a couple where the groom was Icelandic. His mother did not approve of the wedding because she had the fear that the bride was related to them. So, on the wedding day, she got up and actually objected. It took one of the groom's men running down to the bride's mother's house to fetch the family Bible, which traditionally is used to record the family tree in my culture. The groomsman came charging back and about 30 minutes later and just about threw it at the mother and screamed, "No. This woman is not a member of the family. Maybe please be allowed to be one now?" I went to a dry wedding. However, it wasn't dry for the bridal party because they brought their own alcohol and got FK'd up in the limo in the beginning of the reception. They also kicked out anyone else who drank because the bride didn't want any drunk people to ruin her wedding. Not really a horror story. More annoying than anything, a relative of mine got married and the couple made it known quite publicly that they didn't have enough money for a honeymoon, so they asked everyone to make a donation in order to be able to eat. I have no idea if this is a common thing to do, but I and several other family members were unbelievably pissed off that we actually had to pay it all. Never mind that fact that we were family. It's pretty common these days to ask for a donation to the honeymoon instead of the traditional gift register. Nowadays most people live together before they marry and don't have to set up a house. Asking for an entry fee or something is pretty weird though. My father-in-law's girlfriend threw a fit because the bride, my sister-in-law, didn't want her to sit in the mother of the bride's seat. She wanted the spot to be left empty in memory of her mom who passed away 9 years prior. Then she brought her daughter and daughter's boyfriend to the reception and took up spots at the bride's family table. I had the pleasure of sitting next to them. The boyfriend vaped during the reception at the table. The daughter ordered 6 or 7 SX on the beaches. They danced very inappropriately. He kept smacking her ass and she would jump in the air and wrap her legs around him while making out. We were all disgusting. The mother of the groom told them that this was a family-friendly wedding and not a nightclub. Father-in-law's girlfriend was very mad that somebody told her guests to stop acting like dogs in heat. So she caused a scene. My father-in-law sided with his girlfriend and left his own daughter's wedding reception without saying goodbye. Both my mother and her mother faked injuries to try to take the spotlight at my wedding. Not a horror story. More a funny moment. I forgot my wife's vows on the kitchen table at home. And realized it only when her brother was called up to the altar to give them to her. I was supposed to pass the vows to him. Then I realized. Like a minute before the kiss. Her father ran to his car, grabbed wife's iPhone so she could read a copy from Google Drive. Sighed that my mother-in-law was drunk. When we talked to her about it the next day, she was like, "No, I wasn't. Anyway, you shouldn't have invited my sister. I always get drunk with her. Woman. We invited her because you insisted." Then there is my wife's uncle who was always in the path of the photographer and had pretty much no idea how to use his $80 Samsung camera. Basically he took 2 seconds short videos trying to take pictures. The wedding was great though.